Welcome, everybody. My name is Locke. This is the Deep Dive Podcast, and today we have two very special guests. One we've seen before with our main man, Stephen Kick. Can you say hi, Stephen?
Hey, thanks for having me, Locke.
Yeah, joining us today is one of the main partners. Is it CEO Josh of Limited Run Games? And
CEO.
Josh, let us know. Let the audience know who you are and what you do.
So I'm the CEO and founder of Limited Run Games. We have been doing physical releases of primarily digital-only games since 2015. At this point, we've done thousands of games. I don't know the specific count. It's just an absolute incredible number. I think we're somewhere around a new product for every 2 days that we've existed. If you break it down to smaller things like keychains and plush and little things that we've done to support releases, it's insane. It's crazy to think.
That's awesome. What inspired you to start Limited Run up? Was there like a specific moment or experience that pushed you to preserving physical media?
I was a developer before starting this. I had started a game company called Nightdive Studios. We'd struggled a lot. We made an original game called Saturday Morning RPG that came out in 2012. We spent 2 years developing it. Basically, everyone working against the hope that it would be a huge hit, and it ended up, for a variety of reasons, like critics liked it, but it just didn't make money. I think we went with the wrong model. We went with the wrong platform. We really made a bunch of bad decisions, and that forced us to do contract work for partners. And we were basically, building complete games for like $100,000, which is insane. Everyone was working for virtually nothing, and by the time we got to our third contract project, we were essentially penniless and we had no additional work lined up. And instead of going out of business, I wanted to, and having nobody know we existed, I wanted to make sure that one of our games existed physically so that people would remember we existed. So all of this struggle that we had put into building these games wouldn't be wasted. Like, people would remember we were here. Because if you look at it, it's like on the NES, you can remember the bad games. You don't forget them because the bad games are permanent. They exist in cartridge form. Like, people are going to talk about Dino Wars. They're going to talk about Dr. Jekyll and Hyde because these games exist physically and new people are experiencing them every day. So in my mind, I was like, we need to get our game out physically. We had released one of the games we built for our contract partner on Vita. And they were essentially like, nobody plays Vita. We don't care about the revenue there. You can have this game on Vita. You can do it physically. We don't care.
Nice.
So we used that as our experiment for Limited Run, made it physical. So we accomplished this idea of getting one of our games physically preserved and, launched Limited Run in the process. In order to do that, I had to take an $85,000 loan out at the worst possible terms, which my wife only learned about recently, and she was not happy. But at the same time, I don't think I ever would have done it, if I had mentioned it, which, because it was crazy. It was through Lending Club, and I think it was like a 25% rate on it. It was insane. We were thankfully, since Breaching Clear, that first release, sold out in under 2 hours. Thankfully, we were able to repeat that success on subsequent games, and I was able to pay that loan off within 4 months. So
amazing.
Really never got hit by any of that interest, thank God. But if things hadn't worked out, I don't know, I'd be in such a different spot today.
You'd be missing a leg or a tooth or something.
Oh yeah, I'd be in a gutter somewhere.
Now,
no other way about it.
That's a huge risk, but you believed in something and you wanted to go out with a bang and know that you made something you're proud of. You've released physical versions for a ton of stuff, as well as lots of merchandise of games. What kind of criteria do you use to decide which games to bring back? And then Steve, I'll also shoot that to you, but on the digital side.
Yeah, so the things we try to focus on in terms of our releases are really high quality things that have fan bases behind them. When we first started out, we could do physical releases of essentially any game that existed and people would show up for it because there was a novelty at that time for physical media. People were like, small indie games on discs, they were happy about that. But as time went on and more people got into the space after us, it got saturated and people stopped this is really unfortunate for the smaller indie devs. People stop really caring about the smaller indie games. And really now they're looking at it as like, if I'm buying a physical game and I'm paying that premium, I want it to be something that really resonates with me.
Yeah.
So we really focus in on, is there a groundswell behind these games? Is there a fan base that cares about it? Whether it's for the IP, the developer itself, like Nightdive as a developer has a fan base, it has an audience, just like some of our other partners like WayForward do. So when you all do a game, we know that there is an audience that will come and support that, because there's an inherent quality to everything you do, and there's always going to be people that want to support those things. But it makes it hard now to do smaller games with lesser known teams, which stinks, because we used to be able to put one of these games out and basically save developers from going out of business.
Yeah.
And it's just not easy to do that anymore.
That's interesting. How about you, Steven? Do you have do you take what you can get? Are you always scrambling, or is it mostly just like backroom business deals? Or I guess maybe on a personal level, what are you looking at for games? Are they games that are important to you, or is there a bigger picture there?
Well, it's great to hear Josh's story, because ours is basically kind of runs in parallel to them, but on, like you said, the digital side of things. And at first, when we went to go find games, it was basically anything that I could get my hands on. And that list included specifically the games that I used to play with my dad.
Yeah.
So every night when I came home from school, get the homework done, have dinner, and then my dad and I would sit in front of the computer and we'd play adventure games together, because I could use the mouse and my dad could help solve the puzzles, and we could kind of experience the narrative and the story together. And it always seemed like a real adventure that we were having when we completed something. And so when Nightdive was established and we had released System Shock 2, thankfully as our first game, it kind of opened the floodgates of like, wow, look at all these other games that need this treatment, need somebody to come out and champion them, spend the time and the energy to put them back out there for people to enjoy again. And just from my thought process, I was like, I'm going to go down the list A to Z of all the stuff that I played with my dad. And that's where you get games like Bad Mojo, the cockroach game, Time Lapse, Titanic Adventure Out of Time, a bunch of those kind of really cool adventure games that may not have been as popular as Quake and Quake 2 back in the day, but they were open to us, and the developers were just happy to have those games back out there again.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned. There's a couple. That's a funny link too with the FMV games. I know, Josh, those have a special place in your heart too with your release of Plumbers there.
Yeah, I mean, it started with Night Trap, really.
That's right.
The team doing the one guy, Tyler Hogle, who was doing the remaster of Night Trap, came to us and wanted help with the physical release. I mean, that was incredible, because this is one of, I think, the most well-known games of all time. So, for infamous reasons, kicked off the ESRB. It was one of this huge center of debate and violence in video games. Yeah. And since then, we've re-released this game on so many different platforms. I feel like it's almost like inseparable from the limited run brand.
I remember the first game we put in the Sega CD was Sewer Shark, and all the quips and stuff. And then later on there was Wing Commander 3 was all the FMV one, I believe. So those have I also attribute to a love of the FMV. So that being said, do you guys, you focus on physical and digital, but it's game preservation in its own way. What do you think's the biggest challenge when it comes to like reviving and preserving old video games?
Do you want to chime in on that first, Steven?
Yeah. Well, the biggest issue that we have as developers or the people that are responsible for getting the things to run is finding source code, finding those archival assets, and hoping that they even still exist, because in a lot of examples, or a lot of times when we've reached out to developers, the code just doesn't exist anymore, or it's been thrown out, or it might be on some old media that has degraded to such a point where it's become corrupted. There's this one story where we were trying to find a weird adventure game, The Residents' Bad Day on the Midway. Very quirky, very strange adventure game. If you haven't heard of it, you should look it up. There's some cool videos on YouTube. But I got in touch with the original developer, and he told me that basically the day before I got in touch with him, he emptied his closet and threw everything in a landfill. And it's like, well, there goes that game, you know. So yeah, that's a big challenge, but thankfully we've run into a lot of people over the years that have done a really good job of archiving stuff whenever they get their hands on it, whether they worked on it or not. And so there's always this kind of group of people that I can go to and ask if they've got some code lying around. And that's, you know, a major reason why we've even been able to do probably half the games that we've done is just people saving code from the trash pile.
Now, our biggest problem, and I imagine Steven runs into this as well, actually, I know you do, is figuring out who has the licenses to some of these things. That's like the biggest headache that we find. You know, when we were doing Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection, which is a game we developed internally with the classic Jurassic Park games, following the trail on the Ocean games for Jurassic Park was the first challenge, you know, figuring out what happened with those, because Ocean was sold to Infogrames, which is now Atari. But at some point, Atari sold the European stuff to Bandai Namco. So we had to reach out to Bandai Namco and essentially get them to say, like, yeah, we don't have any claim to this. And at that point, the rights basically defaulted back to Atari, who had apparently sold them to Ziggurat. So there was just this like chain of figuring that out. But then, you know, on the Sega Jurassic Park game, which we put in there, Sega didn't really have much documentation related to their US licensed games, because back then, when you were releasing licensed games, it was very much seen as a commodity. Like, who the hell's ever going to want this thing again?
Right.
You know, it serves its point in a time and place, and nobody's thinking like, we're going to re-release this 30 years down the line. So 30 years rolls around and it's like, nobody knows where the paperwork for this thing is. Nobody can guarantee that we own the software rights to it. So I had to kind of go figure out what happened to the president of Blue Sky Software, who was the developer of the game, because Blue Sky was acquired by another company. So it's like, you know, if they had rights in it, they were now acquired by Titus, and then Titus is now owned by Interplay. But the guy at Blue Sky was able to confirm, yeah, we built these for Sega. We were under like an arrangement with them for like 4 years where everything we built for them was theirs, wholly and entirely. There's no paperwork to back that up. So we still needed to waste like months indemnifying Sega if somebody was to come back and say we own this or whatever. But you know, it becomes this really tricky challenge, because a lot of these games that people loved when they were kids are in similar situations where the developers have been sold, they went bankrupt, their rights were liquidated to various people. And then you, like, we were looking to RoboCop, the old RoboCop, like Data East games, and there's like 3 different parties that claim they own that game.
No.
So it's like, how do you ever resolve that? How do you ever re-release this game when there's so many different entities that claim ownership?
I mean, so that being said, Josh, is that the biggest threat to game preservation? Is this splitting of licenses and everyone claiming something different? Like, if not that, what is it?
I mean, I would say that that's circumvented by like piracy. It's like people can still play these games, thankfully. Yeah. I mean, but in terms of like commercially re-releasing the games, yeah, that's the absolute biggest problem when it comes to commercially re-releasing them. It's also like sometimes with the licensed games, you're also going to have to pay. You have to spend money getting the software rights, giving someone an advance for those. Then you have to pay money getting the IP license. So like, if Steven wanted to re-release Jurassic Park Trespasser, which I'm sure he would love to do that, he would have to pay NBC and then pay EA, because EA's got the software rights, NBC's got, or maybe EA doesn't have the software rights. And Steven would know more about this because I think you've looked into DreamWorks Interactive before.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. We did Turok Dinosaur Hunter with DreamWorks Interactive before they were acquired by NBC Universal. Right. So yeah, that's another
that's
where
the lineage. That's where the lineage of I guess that comes from. That makes sense. But it like DreamWorks Interactive was acquired by EA, and there's no, as far as I can tell, there's no specific documentation on what they acquired when they acquired them. So like I was looking into like Jurassic Park: The Lost World, and it's like it's not mentioned as being acquired by EA and anything. They published it for DreamWorks Interactive, so there's maybe this assumption they got it. But in all the press releases about this acquisition, it's all just like, oh, they acquired Medal of Honor. So it's like, who knows what happened to everything else? So you know, it's like this
that big. Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a big monetary puzzle, and you know, this other thing where you have to track everything down and spend a bunch of money to get these games back out. It's crazy.
Is most of your job just being sort of this licensing detective and rooting out where
in a sense, yeah. When there's games we want to re-release, you know, it comes down to that, I think, and I feel like that's a large part of Steven's job as well, right? You know, like trying to figure these out.
Yeah, eventually you just kind of get to know everybody, and when something comes up, you already have an idea in your mind of like where to go first. And thankfully, you know, Josh and I are both in this position where if something isn't 100% clear, we can usually offer like an indemnification clause, which is like, we'll take the risk if somebody comes out of the woodwork because we're pretty sure they won't. And most companies are agreeable to that, thankfully, so that it's kind of like the last ditch effort to get stuff made is just taking on that risk yourself.
Yeah,
but it's worth it.
It's so rare because if you can't find the documentation that supports anybody's ownership to it, the chance that anybody else has documentation that actually supports their ownership, as long as you're indemnified from all the most likely parties, like, you know, the original publisher, the original developer, those are really the only two most likely places where those rights would lie, unless the publisher went out of business, in which case you have to go to whoever acquired most of their assets.
Nice.
But there's a risk to it. So
yeah, that it is a huge risk. I mean, searching for things like what what came out, was it today or yesterday? I don't know. We're recording this at the end of the week, but Killing Time. Do you know that's out now, but that's definitely something. Was that how is Killing Time's path to revival?
Well, I mean, I won't get too deep into it.
Sure.
But yeah, that's actually a really great example, because when we were first looking to do Killing Time, it was actually, I think, back in 2015. And we thought we knew who had the rights. We made a deal with them. Money was exchanged. And then we announced that we were going to do it. And then the actual owner said, wait a minute.
Oh, no.
I actually own this. Here's the paperwork. So we go back to the original party. Hey, they actually own this. Can we have our money back? Nope, don't have it anymore. I spent it, you know. And that's one of the reasons that it took so long to do Killing Time, because the franchise actually exchanged hands during that time period from the guy who had the paperwork to I believe Ziggurat again.
Right.
And then, we're working with them to do, an official sanctioned version.
Holy smokes. Holy smokes.
3DO is one of those companies where when they went out of business, their rights were so like dissected and split to so many places. Like I know a guy who owns like 2 3DO properties, and then Take-Two owns Army Men. And then, like Army Men's a game a lot of people want to see re-released, but it's probably never going to happen because Take-Two would never accept the small amount of money that you could offer as an advance on something like that. So that's one of those risks. But like 3DO, like that's one of those companies where it's just like it's hard to figure out where all this stuff went, because like Steven said, there are some usual suspects. But one of the problems with some of the usual suspects is they'll always just say they own things if you ask them if they own things. Because if there's some plausibility that they own them, they're willing to accept the risk.
Yeah. Let's get into some fun stuff. You guys, as collectors, is there a like holy grail item in your personal collection? Is there something that you're just like, this is the thing?
Yeah, so I pulled some stuff up that
Amazing.
I am
Let's
really
see.
happy about, and a lot of this stuff is, they're holy grail in the sense that like I learned from one of my employees to never be ashamed to ask for autographs when I get the chance.
Fair.
Oh,
So when
cool.
I meet developers, I always make sure to get autographs. I try to
Nice.
not have shame about it. So I've got a couple items here. One of my favorite things is I got a Talk Boy autographed by
nice.
Macaulay Culkin.
Nice.
When we were doing Toe Jam and Earl back in the groove, he was actually one of the executive producers on that game. And when we did our first like limited product for it, one of his friends reached out through email and was like, Macaulay Culkin really wants one of these. Like, what can he do to get one? And I was like, well, I would send one for free, but if he's willing to autograph my Talk Boy, like that would be perfect. And he was like, yeah, he'll do it if you send two, because Kieran also wants one.
Nice.
So
nice.
Now,
like, that's cool.
did he record something on it?
Yeah.
So it was actually like barely functioning. Otherwise, I think he would have, because there was a tape in it. But it's like, this was my childhood one, and I think I like just wore it out to hell. So it barely functions at this point.
That's amazing. What a great pull. What a great pull.
So cool. Now, the question about the Talk Boy, was that created for Home Alone, or was it just a product that was placed in the movie that gained popularity through that?
My guess is it was just something that they made, and they were like, hey, this seems like something you could integrate into the movie. Because there was also there's another like product placement in Home Alone 2 that's lesser known for some like monster goop. It's like a can of monster stuff that squirts out, like silly string, but it's got a monster head on it, I think. And I don't recall him ever actually using it, but like people claim it's in the movie somewhere. And it's like another real toy product. So I feel like after the first movie, like a lot of these toy companies came to them and they were like, we've got something that seems like it'll be real cool for a trap. So, I feel like Tiger Electronics probably paid out the ass to get Talk Boy in that movie as prominently as they did.
Well,
Nice.
But I mean, it made everyone want one. So
yeah, I mean, I wanted one. My friend had one. So of course I just left him lewd messages on it whenever I left his house.
yeah.
I just had
that's what it was good for.
The cheaper one, the Yak Back, where you could just record the one line into it, and then it was mostly just fart sounds. So, how about you, Steven? Do you have a prized collection possession?
Yeah, so I found this at Goodwill. It's just one of those, once in a lifetime things. But I'm relatively near Bellevue, Seattle area where Valve is, and somebody donated the developer edition of Half-Life 2 there.
Oh wow. Nice.
Wow.
And when I saw this, I just didn't even know what it was. I was like, that's the Half-Life logo, but this box it's made of stainless steel and it's been like welded together.
I can feel it through the camera.
It's like a 12-pound thing. It's got a t-shirt, it's got a CDR burned version of Half-Life 2 on it.
Hell yeah.
And I reached out to my Steam reps there and was like, what is this? And they're like, oh, you somehow ended up with a dev version of Half-Life 2.
So even though it's a CDR, I mean, that's technically the only physical release
version,
of Half-Life 2, right? Because when they put it out, I mean, it was code in a box because they wanted to funnel people to Steam. Or am I wrong on that?
I think there was a DVD version, and there was a CD version too, but it shipped on like 8 discs.
Okay.
I think. But there's there's a hat in here. And
wow.
I sent for Christmas last year, I sent Steven a sealed Half-Life 2 collector's edition. And it's a similar story. I was at like a kid's consignment sale, and somebody who had worked for like Vivendi Universal, who I guess was the distributor on that title, had just dropped all their samples off at this kid's consignment sale. And I don't know if it was him or his wife that did it, but like every game that he had ever gotten samples for was there for $1. So there was like 3 brand new sealed Half-Life 2 collector's editions for $1. The only downside was the person who had dropped them off put like packing tape on the front to affix the price, which was just like, it pained me to see that. But I found out in hindsight that the person who dropped them off was likely the person who got David Jaffe into the game industry.
Oh, wow.
So, because all the games there, you can follow the lineage, and it matches up with this guy's Moby games perfectly.
Huh.
So like the first game I found there was like sealed copies of Mickey Mania for Genesis. That was
Great
the first game David Jaffe worked on. And then this guy went to Vivendi Universal where he worked as a producer, and all the other games I found like Scarface and Ultimate Destruction, Hulk, X-Files, and Half-Life 2, they were all, it lined up with the timeline that this guy had worked on. So it's interesting when you find like developer stuff in the wild, and then you kind of figure out like who owned these things in the past.
Yeah, that's cool. It's like, doing some digital archaeology. It's like figuring out who was where and when. What else, Josh? You got to show me some more stuff.
Yeah, so I've got another autographed thing here that I think is really cool and unique. So I've got the original Final Fantasy for NES, and it's autographed by Amano, Sakaguchi, and Umatsu. So, they're kind of like the holy trinity of Final Fantasy names. So Amano did all of the concept art, Umatsu did all the music, and then Sakaguchi was the designer. So James Milkey, my employee who kind of taught me to get everything signed when I can, he actually was meeting them all in Japan, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to meet them. Do you want to send anything?" I was like, "Hell yes, I'm going to send my Final Fantasy for NES," because Final Fantasy is real meaningful to me. While I didn't play the original on NES, I mean, when I played 7 on PS, actually, I played the PC version of 7 because I didn't have a PS1 yet.
Nice,
but it like really revolutionized the kinds of games that I wanted to play and make. I played Pokemon Red. It was my first RPG. And then Final Fantasy is the one that really got me into like more serious RPGs.
Ooh,
there you go.
Nice. I just happened to have it on my desk.
Hey, it just happened to be here. An OG Pokemon game. That's amazing. That's fun. I wish my Final Fantasy copy was in such good condition. I purchased mine used from one of my friends who didn't have the patience for it because it's quite a difficult game. And but like 30 years later, the map's all torn and all the insert because that came with like a huge amount of maps and like it had a big table chart in it.
It feels like a brick.
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot of stuff.
The weight
in
of
there.
This thing just feels. It's the most full NES box I've ever held outside of maybe like Dragon Warrior. Yeah,
big time. So that's an awesome pull. That's crazy.
I gotta go grab 2 things.
Yeah, go get your stuff.
I'll leave this with you while I'm gonna go do that. I remember specifically going to Babbage's or Electronics Boutique and going through the bargain bin and buying whatever box was the heaviest because I was like, it's got to have a big manual in it or multiple discs, which means it's going to be the better game, right?
Yeah. I mean, they did that for a while on PS1 games. They were taking 1-disc games and putting them in those thick 2-disc cases because they were like, let's trick people that these are bigger games than they are.
And it was just the other half was like, a manual.
Vegas Stakes, I think, was just a casino game. For some reason, they shipped it in a double-disc chunky case to try to make people think, "Ooh, this is better than all the other casino games out there." It's got a lot of meat to it.
Yeah. What you got? Some more stuff? I'll just keep taking it, and then I'll
throw
I got some questions at you.
Got another autograph piece here, and this one's
sick.
so this one is a watch from Shenmue, and it's autographed by Yu Suzuki, who's kind of like.
Wow.
If I had to describe Yu Suzuki, he's the Sega Miyamoto.
Yes.
He designed Outrun, Hang On, so many amazing games for Virtua Fighter. So this is the actual watch the character wears in Shenmue, and it's got a little Shenmue logo. I don't know if it'll go out of focus or in focus there. It's got a Shenmue logo on the watch.
That's sick.
And Shenmue is a big game for me. Dreamcast is my favorite console, and Shenmue was a game that like opened my eyes to seeing that like games can be about more than what a lot of the stuff was at the time. Because Shenmue is this very slow-paced game. You live inside of this open world. You do mundane things, but you advance like a narrative. It's more about advancing a narrative, living in a world. It's slow-paced, and you kind of have different goals when you're playing it as opposed to a lot of the other games I played. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that like games can be these bigger narrative experiences that don't have to rely so heavily on everything always being exciting.
Yeah, you can still develop a character even though you have to go move some boxes around.
Yeah.
Steve, what'd you go get?
Okay, so I got 2 things. I got my copy of Deus Ex, which was signed by Warren Spector.
Damn, big
Nice.
box.
So yeah, when Josh was bringing out the signed stuff, I was like, yeah, I
Wait
bought
a
some
minute.
like rare things, but I do have some signed things. Like when I met Warren, it was at one industry event or another, and I knew that we were going to meet him.
Yeah.
And it's hard bringing these big boxes around and not like getting them damaged, and
Yeah.
it's this harrowing thing, and then you're waiting for the ink to dry on it before you put it away. But that was my first time meeting Warren. Just an amazing guy.
Cool.
So many stories he just loved to tell. About his time at Looking Glass and Ion Storm, and just his experiences in the industry. Just a standout moment, kind of thing.
I found that developers really like it when people bring things for them to sign, because it doesn't happen super often for them.
Yeah.
So it gives them a chance to like feel like they've made the impacts that they've made. Because I think as game developers, we're pretty removed from the people who play our projects. So it's like you don't really know who the people on the end of your game are. And when you get a chance to like meet somebody who legitimately loves your game or the thing that you worked on, like it really gives you an extra like kick to like want to make games and want to do better.
Especially if that is years later, and it's a past memory, and then someone comes up and has an anecdote about how that game affected them in their life, or like even got them into games or into game development. Like there's a lot of those stories where it's just like, I played Deus Ex and that was a game changer for me in terms of like what you could do and the choices you could have. And it's a pretty special moment to be able to share that with the creator of it. So
one of my biggest regrets is actually very related to this. When I went to, I feel like this was my second GDC I ever went to. I drove around with some like half price books in the area around it, and I found a complete in box copy of Deus Ex, and I was like, I should just put this in my backpack, because I guarantee, like I had this feeling that I was going to see Warren Spector walking around, and sure enough, I saw him like 3 times throughout that GDC. And I never put the thing in my backpack because I had that fear that I was going to crush the box.
Yeah.
And the one day that I put it in there, I wouldn't see him.
Oh man.
Because this thing was like pristine and I did not want to screw it up.
Man. Yeah.
I was going to say, Josh, to your point about signing, that's something that I've kind of had to get used to, because when I go to the Portland Retro Game Expo, people recognize me now, which is a trip.
Yeah.
And they ask me to sign stuff, and usually it's like it's still sealed, and they're like, can you please make this out to me, I love blah blah blah. And I'm like, you want me to open this? Are you sure?
Yeah. I always feel weird because people will ask me to sign limited run products, and I'm like, I didn't work on these games. My name does not belong on these. It's like different if they bring me something like Plumbers Don't Wear Ties now, because I did work on that. But like most of the time when people approach me to get my autograph, it's just on like their favorite limited run release or whatever. And I'd say 99 out of 100 limited run releases I had nothing to do with outside of coming up with packaging or collector's edition stuff. So like I just don't feel like worthy of even putting my name on it.
Man. So with that being said, like, what's your guys' approach to creating limited editions or like extras, like art books or soundtracks or figurines or plushies or whatever? How do you like balance the appeal to like maybe casual fans and hardcore fans? Like what can you just shine some light on that?
Yeah, from my side, I always ask the developers first. So for a lot of our releases like that we do with Nightdive, Steven has no shortage of ideas, especially when it's something like System Shock. I don't think we've ever come up with anything that went in any of the System Shock boxes, because Steven, you suggested all of those, which is great. Because I always look at it and it's like, if the person who's most passionate about the project in the room can be the one that has the ideas, it's going to be the best product. Because if they want it, other people who love this thing are going to want it. So, for example, when we did Monkey Island, the first time we revealed it, it was ideas that I came up with. I like Monkey Island, but I'm not like the world's #1 Monkey Island fan. Yeah. So when we announced it the first time, the fan feedback was like, I like some of this stuff, but I hate some of this stuff. So we went back to like one of the biggest Monkey Island fans on the internet and said, "What's wrong with this?" And he helped us retool it. And when we re-announced it, everyone was like, "This thing's amazing. I've got to buy it." And as a result, we sold so many more than I think we would have if we stuck to what we had. But there are other times where it's a game I absolutely love. So it's so easy for me to just come up with, this is a CE I know is going to sell. Like Scott Pilgrim, when we did that game, I love that game. So I knew exactly what to put in there. The CE ended up coming out and everyone was excited about it. And I think that's our highest selling CE. I think we did like 20,000 of those, which was insane.
Or you get someone who wants a lunchbox for something like Rise of the Triad.
Yeah, I mean that was a suggestion I think from Dave. Dave wanted the lunchbox.
Yeah, I just talked to him about that. Just like, I just want a lunchbox. I don't care. Make it happen.
He just wanted a lunchbox, and we made it happen. It's there.
Yeah, I was like, that's Dave, amazing. This is your baby. You can have that lunchbox.
So, looking ahead, where do you guys see your companies in the next 5-10 years in terms of like, other than like, I hope we're around? What kind of innovations are you looking to do in terms of physical or digital distribution or anything like that? Where do you guys see yourselves?
So from my side, I'm looking to get, more into working with our Carbon engine. Our Carbon engine is really for like older console games that, we work with all these partners like Konami who have these huge catalogs of retro games that just aren't necessarily worth putting the Castlevania level funding or treatment to.
Yeah.
So we really developed this engine with the goal of going to partners like Konami and saying, hey, these 200 titles in your catalog that, are probably like B tier titles or B tier IP, great games like Rocket Knight Adventures, which we released.
Yep.
Great game, but very niche compared to a Contra or a Castlevania. So we wanted to create this tech so we could re-release those games and tap into these great games. And my hope in the next 5 years is to do more and more of that. We're building that tech out to make it easier so that we can release more of these games and kind of help bring back a lot more stuff, a lot more variety from that era.
Nice. How about you, Steven? What are you hoping to have your impact on the industry?
Well, I'd love to continue re-releasing classic games in the way that we've been doing, both niche titles like Killing Time and PO'd, and then AAA titles like stuff from Bethesda and id Software. Just having a mix of that is just really great, because it really helps serve both purposes. We understand Doom is always going to be playable,
totally,
but without us, maybe PO'd and Killing Time might have languished for a lot longer than it had already. But we've already got our Kex team, which is responsible for those remasters. We've got what we call the Shock team, which was responsible for the System Shock remake. And I would love to see us get to a point where we could use the Kex engine to create original titles that kind of fall into that same time period that we like to work in, which is the mid 90s to the mid 2000s essentially. Maybe create a new Quake 3 engine shooter in 2028 or whatever. I think that would be really fun. Just let our guys who have all the experience and everything that they've learned from working on these classic games make something in the same vein. I think that could be really exciting.
Cool. That's awesome. That is exciting. Let's bring out a couple more toys and a couple more questions. What else did you bring over, Steve?
I got,
other than your cute cat.
Yeah, I've left my door open and she just decided to be.
That's all right. She's been playing in the background too. It's been fun.
She's a cutie.
Yeah.
So this one is really important to me, but this is my childhood version of Grim Fandango.
Oh, wow.
And I remember getting this for Christmas, and I think it was like 1998. But it's signed by Tim Schafer, and he wrote to Steven plus his dad. And he signed this for me when I got to go visit the Double Fine offices in San Francisco a number of years ago. They had kind of invited us there to talk about what we could do or what we could bring to the table in bringing back some of the old LucasArts titles after they had been acquired by Disney.
Yeah.
And nothing really came of that aside from meeting Tim, meeting Justin Bailey, who was the head of biz dev there at the time, and just making lifelong friends.
Nice.
So that was a really special moment for me.
Nice. Josh, you got another special thing for us?
Yeah, I've got some stuff. I wanted to get something out because it just connects to what Steven just had.
Please do.
1 second. This links up quite well with what Steven brought out. I have never visited Double Fine, but when you may remember when Kingdoms of Amalur came out and was this huge flop.
Yeah.
When 38 studios and big huge games went out of business, they did an asset like foreclosure, like sold everything off. And as part of that, since I was running my game development company at the time, I bought like this box of like 54 Xbox 360 wired controllers for next to nothing.
Hell yeah.
And a couple of them ended up being labeled, and let me see if it goes in focus here.
If found,
Double Fine
return.
Productions. Yeah. So I managed to bring one of these to Tim Schaefer at PAX. That was the first time I met him, was like PAX 2013, I think. And I was like, hey, I know it's going to seem weird that I have one of your controllers, but I got this from another studio. Can you autograph this? And that's what he put on there. If found, please return to Tim Schaefer.
That's really funny that you have.
I thought that was super. That was super clever that he came up with something like that on the spot without even like breaking a sweat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Was that PAX East?
Yeah, that would have been PAX East. Yeah, that was my Saturday Morning RPG was selected for like a mobile game showcase there. We actually brought it on the Ouya of all consoles. So it was the first time that the public could ever play an Ouya. There were two of them at PAX East. There was Saturday Morning RPG, and then Tribute had one in their booth. And this was like way before Tribute was kind of at the status they are now. They were there showing off Wizorb. This was before they had done Ninja Turtles and Mercenary Kings. So it was just this weird time where some of us, people who are bigger names now, are just very small and unknown.
Right. I still have my Ouya.
Yeah, mine's somewhere too. I don't know where.
I'm back at Kickstarter.
Yeah, big time. Big time.
One of the things I feel most embarrassed about from that PAX was I met the devs of Shovel Knight, and they were just about to launch their Kickstarter. And like when they were explaining it to me, I was just like, this doesn't seem like something that's going to get a lot of funding. So like I kind of like brushed it off in my head.
Right.
I wasn't like cocky or like or whatever about it, but I was kind of thinking in my head like an NES style game. I mean, there's so many games like that. Like, good luck. Like, I hope it works out. Like, so I think I kind of looked like an ass because that game ended up being one of like the biggest indie games of all time.
Yeah.
So shows
shows
a
really
lack of foresight on my side for that one. I grabbed one other thing to show off here, another autographed thing. This is my favorite game of all time, Phantasy Star Online, and it's autographed by the entire dev team outside of Yuji Naka. So he was not present to autograph this, but it's like the rest of all the important players are on there, like lead designer, lead programmer, producer. It's pretty insane. I'm super happy to have this because I love this game. This was first game I think I ever spent over 1,000 hours playing, and it ended up being kind of this core pillar of my childhood. In middle school, I would come home and play this game and connect with other people online and play it. And it's like I've just never had another experience like that because I don't have the level of free time that I did when I was in middle school. So even in high school, I didn't have that free time. So it's just like I look back on middle school very fondly because I had so much time and no responsibilities. So this game kind of fits into that. It was, the background for that great time in my youth.
That's pretty cool that for it to be an online game as well. I have that with like a bunch of Genesis stuff where I would buy it and just like seal myself off in the room. Phantasy Star 4, I remember that, just playing hundreds of hours into that game, and yeah, during those formative years where, like you said, Josh, like zero responsibility and tons of time.
Yeah.
Josh, I got a question for you. Do you get fan mail sometimes from people who are grateful about being able to play these old games again and then reference kind of that same feeling of, hey, I played this when I was 8, 9 years old. I was in middle school or whatever, and life just seems so much like not better, but just there was a different feeling about it due to the whole lack of responsibility and being able to kind of put them back into that mindset even for an hour or two. It just evokes these feelings of nostalgia that that mean a lot to people. Do you get those?
We get it every now and then. So, I'd say we've probably gotten like maybe like 7 or 8 throughout the course of our history at the office, where they're like these letters that are very passionately written about, how they're thankful that somebody is focused on physical media because, that really matters to them as somebody, who grew up with it and like really treasured it in their childhood, but also with specific games as well. Like somebody wrote for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I mean, we didn't actually develop the re-release, but they wrote in there like, it's my favorite game of all time. I'm so happy that it
Nice.
got a collector's edition like you guys did, that, it got more for it than it's gotten in the last 20 years. And,
Totally.
a lot of people are very thankful for that. I'd say the time when I get the most letters though ends up being like, I wouldn't say these are like passionate, effusive letters that are just like, oh, I love everything you're doing and it's so meaningful to me. But when I buy games on eBay for my collection, I have gotten so many times where people are like, oh, you're from Limited Run. That's awesome. Thank you for everything you're doing. So like real short notes, but it's still nice nonetheless to like see something like that. And one time I bought a game, I bought like a really cheap Neo Geo Pocket game. It was like a Derby Stallion or something, like one of the horse racing games that I just needed to check a box in my collection. And the seller recognized my name and he sent me a copy of Mega Man Battle Fighters, which is one of the most expensive Japanese Neo Geo Pocket games. And it was like perfect condition, complete in box, like probably a $500 game. And he just popped it in there alongside this Derby racing game because he liked Limited Run so much. So that was a really nice experience. It's neat when something like that happens. But I also really like it when we get fan mail. It just doesn't happen super often because, I think we're more on like the product end of it.
Right.
We're getting more into development and reviving older games. And I think like we'll see a frequency increase of stuff like that as time goes on when we do more projects like Jurassic Park. So Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection, the games in there are not the best games in the world, but they sold 10 million copies in the 90s and people played the heck out of them as kids. And we have gotten people saying like, I'm so glad you re-released that Jurassic Park SNES game. I loved it. I used to play it with my brother. I used to play it with my sister or my dad. And I, going back to Steven's story, I have found that there are a lot of times where people really bring up these moments of playing games with their parents. And that, I feel like above all else, is one of the most impactful things when it comes to people being nostalgic for older games. Like with Monkey Island in particular, that's one of those games when we re-released it, we saw so many people saying, I used to play this with my dad. It means so much to me that I get to see this again. Because when we announced that, Monkey Island had been dormant for, since the special editions came out on Xbox 360. So, to see some acknowledgement. Yeah, to see some acknowledgement of this thing just meant a lot to the people who grew up with this and saw that this IP as this very important cornerstone of their childhood.
You guys have mentioned obviously how important game preservation is. That's kind of the theme and the topic of this conversation. But do you have a game that you think's been overlooked by history and maybe deserves to be preserved? I know, Steven, you've got your White Whale, but like maybe something overlooked.
One of my favorite games of all time is Alpha Protocol, the spy game from Obsidian.
Dude, it's a good game.
Yeah, I think people absolutely hate it because it reviewed terribly at the time. It's like you have to avoid the systems in it that are broken, but if you play it in a very specific way, it's an amazing game. Yeah, where like the choices and consequence of the narrative actually unfold in a way that really feels unlike any other game. And I just feel like somebody should be given the shot to re-release that game with a lot of those broken systems fixed. And then, that would just be, it would be an amazing game.
Yeah.
It would be so good.
Oh, let's do it.
I 100% agree. I think Alpha Protocol it has an amazing skeleton. And then if you can fill in some of those gaps, like you said, with the busted systems, like there's something there for sure. What a good
it's like
pull.
the stealth system in it was completely broken. And I think that was the main problem is people are like, it's a spy game. I got to play it stealth. And that just influenced so many people to look at it poorly because the stealth was so broken. But if you go in there and you tweak some of those things and fix those broken systems, and I say that like it's so easy. It's probably much more complicated than I'm saying. But
you just turn the graphics up on level 3. Easy.
You just gotta like look at these broken things, figure out how do we make them good, and that game is like that is a solid like 9 out of 10 game, and I think more people need to actually play and experience that game.
Yeah, big time. Nice pull. How about you, Steve?
All right, so we won't do the whole No One Lives Forever.
We say it every single time we chat. It's like, we're gonna figure out what No One Lives Forever.
Yeah. But we'll, what I'll do is I brought a copy of another Monolith game that I really love that is often forgotten and really hard to find. So hold on a second. So Claw.
Wow.
It is a side scroller, which was relatively rare on PC, even back then. But it's a really cool game. The level design is great. It can be a little hard at times, but it's got great characters, great animation. It's got fully animated cutscenes. It's super cool. There's still a really dedicated fan base, of course. They've got a Discord channel and they have level design competitions.
Nice.
It's really awesome. So I would love to do that. I think it would be perfect on Switch or Steam Deck or just a handheld. But it's a side scroller that just kind of got lost to time.
And was the original release just PC?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It had a really weird release. Like this is like one of 2 original big boxes that I've ever seen. And I think the reason for that is because the game got packed in a lot with, I want to say, like gateway PCs that had DVD drives.
Okay.
So it had multiple releases, but most of the times it was just in just a regular sleeve without any packaging. So it's just a weird game.
I remember a lot of games that came that way. One of my favorite computer games when I was a kid, and this game actually probably really sucks at this point. So, I this is not me saying I would re-release it, but MegaRace.
MegaRace, dude.
With Lance Boyle.
Yes. MegaRace is
So, I mean, I got that as a pack-in with my dad's Packard Bell. The Packard Bell came with like 50 games on CD or whatever, or 50 pieces of software. Like 3 of them were games. And one of them was MegaRace. And it's like, I tried to find like a boxed copy of that, but it's like, I feel like that game was only distributed with computers.
What a trip. That my copy of MegaRace is literally in a Ziploc with a piece of masking tape that says MegaRace on it. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, that game is dope. Gameplay wise as a kid, I was like not realizing that the whole race course was just on autopilot or whatever. But I feel like if I went back and played it today, it doesn't like stand up. But that's a game that I feel like, I've got a lot of nostalgia for it, even if it's probably not the best game in the world.
No. One of the tracks is inside of like a robotic whale, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we got to go in this a little bit. So we all had the same Packard Bell computer growing up. Because I remember it had MegaRace. It came with like a Sports Illustrated disc. It had 3D inside the body, 3D dinosaurs.
And I wasn't much of a gore guy, so like I just avoided the 3D body one. And Packard Bell had that like custom interface to like intercept windows or whatever. Yeah, where it was like a room that you would go in, and in the kids' room I had hidden. Yeah. I had hidden the 3D body image thing because I was like, this is gross. I don't want to see this. Like, put it behind something.
Oh man. Yeah, I'll just say the very first time that I met Josh was at GDC. Gosh, how long ago was that?
Would have been 2019, I think, or it was either 2018 or 2019. I know we had a copy of. It had to be 2019 because I had Outlast 1 and 2 for you on Switch.
Nice.
That's right. And you gave us a copy of Ukulele.
Yep.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. And we had got like an invite for these limited run guys who wanted to do physical, and I was like, well, all right, we'll meet them. And they came up, and they had these the book bags full of games, and they just like dumped them out on the bed in the hotel room. It's like, you'll make these for our games?
Yep.
He's like the Resident Evil merchant. He just holds open his coat and he's like, check it out.
Yeah. And he's like, okay, and you can have all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't even fit half this in my luggage.
You know how many big box PC games I'm carrying around? I can't carry these.
Yeah, but it's a really great memory. And I think as soon as Josh and I realized we were both big Transformer collectors too,
Nice.
we've been BFF.
Yeah, I feel like I could have sealed that deal faster if I had known you were a Transformers fan.
Yeah.
If I just walked in there and been like, oh, I love Transformers, and let's talk about.
We got to sign some deals
G1
with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Josh, what's coming up with you guys? What's coming up with limited run games? What's on the horizon?
So we've got a pop-up shop in New York City that's going to be happening. So it's in the SoHo district in New York City. That's going to be on November the 8th and the 9th of November. And Steven is actually going to be there as one of our guests of honors. So that will be doing signings. So you'll be able to come there, buy some of our leftover Nightdive products. You can bring your own, of course, and you can get the signature of Steven himself right on your Nightdive games, which is what could be better than that. And I'm excited for this event. We invited out a few of our kind of most frequent partners. We've got somebody from Tribute Games coming out, and we've got Steven coming out. And I think it's crazy because when you think about it, I mean, like, of the partners we've worked with, I think like the two game companies we've done more with than anybody else, in terms of indie companies, were Nightdive and Tribute.
Yeah.
We've done almost everything you've released on console at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Demetrius is going to be there too, right?
Yep, Demetrius will be there as well. So,
Mr.
The
MVG.
modern vintage gamer himself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Awesome. Well, looking forward to that event.
Make sure if you get MVG to sign something, make sure it's copies of Bill and Ted's Excellent Retro Collection.
Nice.
That's his least favorite thing I've ever forced him to work on.
Nice. Wicked. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming and chatting and doing some show and tell. And yeah, just talking about preserving gaming, because that's a huge topic right now with everything moving to sort of this digital revolution. So go see these guys in SoHo if you're in and around that area, November 8th and 9th. Steven, always pleasure. And Josh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and just, yammering on about nerdy stuff. Yeah, appreciate it.
It's all good. Favorite thing to do.
Looking forward to chatting with you guys hopefully soon in the future. Maybe hit up some of the next game releases. So, on behalf of myself, Josh, and Steven, this is Locke signing off for Deep Dive.